The giant bride's warning, a terrifying secret the rancher never saw coming. The wind never truly stopped on Kestrel Ridge. It only changed its mood. Some days it came gentle and warm, pushing the tall grass like a slow river. Other days it came sharp with red dust, scraping against fences and skin, as if the planet itself wanted to remind everyone who was in charge. Caleb Rourke had lived on that edge of the world long enough to read the wind like a book. He could tell when the herd would spook before it happened. He could tell when a storm was lying about how close it really was. He could even tell when the old generator behind the barn was about to cough and stall just from the way the air felt. That morning the wind felt wrong, not angry, not storm-heavy, wrong in a different way, like the air was holding its breath. Caleb stood on his porch with a mug of bitter calf looking over his land. The ranch spread across a wide slope of rust-colored soil, broken by patches of stubborn green and the silver lines of irrigation pipes. Farther out, his grazer herd moved slowly, their broad backs and thick legs built for the rough ground. They were calm, tearing at the grass with steady mouths, their tails swishing at biting insects. Caleb's old drone, Patch, hovered nearby at shoulder height. Patch looked like a metal dinner plate with a camera eye and two stubby arms. One arm had been replaced with a wrench. The other had a cracked plating that Caleb had patched with scrap. The drone clicked softly, scanning. "Yeah, I see it too," Caleb muttered. He didn't really talk to Patch because he thought it understood. He talked because out here silence could get heavy. The horizon was clear. Too clear, no dust storm, no clouds, just a hard blue sky. Then the sky blinked. At first, Caleb thought his eyes were playing tricks, but Patch tilted and emitted a short alarm chirp. Caleb's mug stopped halfway to his mouth. A bright streak cut across the sky, white at the front and violet at the edges, like fire wrapped in strange colors. It moved faster than any shuttle he had ever seen. The light flared, then dipped lower, angled toward the far side of his range where the land dropped into a rocky basin. The ground trembled as if a giant had stomped somewhere in the distance. The grazers lifted their heads in unison. A ripple went through the herd, uneasy and sharp. Some of them made low, nervous sounds. Caleb set his mug down and grabbed his hat. "Patch with me?" Patch buzzed in agreement and followed as Caleb crossed the porch, took the steps two at a time, and headed toward the barn. Inside, he kept an old Rover with thick tires and a battered frame. It was more dust than paint now, but it still ran because Caleb had no patience for things that quit on him. He swung into the driver's seat, hit the ignition, and the Rover growled to life. As he drove, the wind picked up. It carried a faint smell of something burned, not wood, not oil, something cleaner like heated stone. He made it to the basin after 20 minutes of hard driving. The ground here was broken and uneven, filled with jagged rocks and shallow dips. Caleb slowed the Rover and eased down into the basin's edge. The smell was stronger now. Then he saw the crater. It wasn't huge like the holovids showed when a real meteor hit. It was more like something had slammed down hard and controlled, tearing up the ground in a neat circle. The rocks around it were scorched in a smooth pattern, like glass had tried to form and failed. In the center, steam rose in thin lines. Caleb stopped the Rover and climbed out. Patch floated higher, scanning, its camera eye moving quickly. Caleb's hand went to the side of his belt where he kept a utility tool. It was not a weapon, not really. It could cut rope, fix wire, and if someone was foolish enough, it could also sting. But Caleb had never wanted trouble. Trouble always came anyway. He stepped closer. The crater had a shape pressed into it, like something large had landed kneeling. At first, Caleb thought it was a broken piece of machinery. Then the machinery moved. A figure shifted slowly in the crater, pushing against the scorched ground. Caleb froze. She was tall. Not just tall like a human who had eaten well, but tall like something built on a different scale. Even kneeling, her shoulders were at Caleb's chest level. When she lifted her head, her face caught the light, and Caleb forgot to breathe for a moment. She looked humanoid, but not human. Her skin was pale, almost silvery, with faint patterns that shimmered like thin frost lines. Her hair fell in long waves, dark and heavy, but threaded with strands that glowed softly as if tiny lights were woven through it. And she wore something that made Caleb's mind stall. It looked like armor, but it also looked like ceremony. Plates curved over her shoulders and chest in smooth, elegant shapes, marked with symbols that were not scratched or printed but grown into the material. Over her head and down her back hung a veil made of light, thin as mist and bright as moonshine. It fluttered even though there was no wind inside the crater, as if it had its own quiet life. She turned her eyes toward Caleb. They were large, dark, and full of a tired fear that felt too real to ignore. Caleb's throat went dry. "Hey," he said because it was the only word that came easily. Patch emitted a soft caution tone. The giant woman's lips moved. She tried to speak, but no sound came at first. She swallowed, her throat working as if it hurt. Then she forced words out, slow and broken. "They will follow me." Her accent was strange, like someone had learned human speech from old recordings and never practiced with real mouths. Caleb didn't move. He didn't step closer and he didn't step back. He let the space between them stay calm. "Who will follow you?" he asked. Her eyes widened slightly as if she didn't expect a question. She blinked and the veil shimmered. "You must run," she said. "Run, hide." Caleb glanced up at the empty sky. No ships, no alarms from the colony network, nothing. He looked back at her. She was shaking, but not from cold, from effort, from pain, something. Caleb crouched down at the edge of the crater, keeping his hands visible. "You're hurt." She looked at him, then at his hands, then at Patch. Her gaze lingered on the drone as if it was familiar and frightening at the same time. She tried to rise. One hand pressed into the ground, fingers long and strong. Her arm trembled. She got halfway up, then faltered, breathing hard. A faint blue fluid seeped from a crack along her side where the armor plate had split. Caleb's mind moved quickly. Blue blood, alien, real, not a dream. "You're bleeding," he said softly. Her head turned away, proud even in weakness. "No time." Caleb frowned. He could run. He could drive back and call the colony sheriff. He could send a message to the nearest station. He could do the smart thing. But Caleb had never been good at leaving a problem bleeding in the dirt. He looked at Patch. "Scan her, quick." Patch hovered lower, a beam of light passing over the alien's side. It beeped in warning, then projected a simple red icon in the air. Injury detected. The giant woman watched the light with a tense stillness. Her fingers tightened in the dust. Caleb slowly took off his hat and set it down. "All right," he said. "You're coming with me." Her eyes snapped back to him. "No, run." "I heard you," Caleb said. "But I don't leave people in holes." Her expression flickered at the word people, like she was unsure if it applied to her. Caleb stood and walked back to the rover. He opened the rear storage and pulled out a water pack and a small med kit. The kit was basic, meant for cuts, burns, and livestock scratches. It wasn't made for alien injuries, but it was better than nothing. He returned to the crater and held the water out carefully. "Drink." She stared at it. Suspicion and need fought inside her eyes. Caleb kept his arm steady. "It's water, clean." She reached out with careful slowness, as if any sudden movement might trigger a trap. Her fingers wrapped around the pack. They were warm, rough at the tips like someone who had worked or trained. She drank, small at first, then more. Her throat moved and her shoulders lowered by a fraction. Caleb opened the med kit and took out a sealing gel tube. It was designed to close skin and stop bleeding. He held it up. "This might sting." Her gaze followed it. She didn't understand the words fully, but she understood the tone. She nodded once. Caleb stepped closer, slow enough that she could stop him if she wanted. Up close, he could see the fine details. The symbols on her armor were not decorative. They looked like a language or maybe a record. The veil shimmered with tiny moving lines, like a star map made of light. He applied the gel to the cracked edge of the wound where the blue fluid seeped. The gel reacted instantly, turning clear and firm, sealing the area. The alien woman inhaled sharply but did not pull away. She held still, gripping the water pack so tightly it crinkled. When Caleb finished, he stepped back. "Better." She swallowed again. Her voice came out quieter. "You should not." Caleb shrugged. "Too late." Patch hovered near her shoulder, scanning. The drone gave a softer tone now, less alarm and more curiosity. The giant woman tilted her head slightly toward Patch. "Machine, friend?" Caleb blinked. "I guess so. Patch is mostly useful." Patch chirped as if offended. The woman's mouth shifted, not quite a smile, but something close. Then her body shook again and the moment broke. Caleb looked at her carefully. "Can you stand?" She tried. This time she made it to her feet, slow and unsteady. Standing, she was even taller than Caleb expected, close to 8 feet, maybe more. Her armor made her seem larger, but her frame underneath was strong and lean. She swayed, and Caleb moved without thinking, reaching out to steady her elbow. For a second, her muscles tensed like a spring. Then she let him help just enough to keep balance. Her voice came out like a whisper. "They will see your kindness dangerous." Caleb helped her toward the rover. You keep saying they. Who are they? She swallowed. Collectors, Caleb paused. Collectors of what? Her eyes turned toward the sky again as if she could already see something hidden behind the blue. Of worlds, she said. The words settled over Caleb like dust. He opened the rover door wider. Getting her inside was not easy. The seat was built for humans, and she moved stiffly, carefully folding her long legs. Caleb had to adjust the seat back and remove a crate from the floor. Patch floated in, bumping the roof once before finding space. When she was inside, Caleb shut the door gently. He ran around to his side, started the rover, and began driving back toward his ranch. For several minutes, neither of them spoke. The rover's engine hummed. The tires crunched over rock. The wind pushed at the vehicle like a steady hand. Caleb stole glances at her as he drove. Her veil dimmed slightly, the light fading to a soft glow. She sat with her hands in her lap, fingers interlaced, posture stiff as if she was trying to hold herself together through pure will. Finally, Caleb broke the silence. "What's your name?" She looked at him slowly. "C. Roth Thiel." "Sarathiel," Caleb repeated, careful with the syllables. She nodded. "I'm Caleb," he said. "This is my ranch, Kestrel Ridge. You're safe for now." Sarathiel's eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in sadness. "No safe, not with me." Caleb kept his eyes on the path ahead. "Maybe, but you can rest. We'll figure it out." Sarathiel's gaze moved to the dashboard, to the worn controls, the patched wiring, the old screens with cracked corners. She looked at it all like it was strange, but also like it reminded her of something. "You live alone?" she asked. Caleb gave a short laugh. "Patch and the grazers keep me company." Sarathiel looked at him more directly. "Why?" Caleb shrugged again, one hand steady on the wheel. "Someone has to raise food. Someone has to keep things running. I like quiet." Sarathiel's voice turned softer. "Quiet ends." Caleb didn't answer right away. He could feel the truth in that. Quiet always ended one way or another. As the ranch came into view, Caleb saw the herd still unsettled. A few grazers had moved closer to the fences, their heads up, watching. The wind carried a faint hum now, so quiet it could have been imagination. Patch clicked uneasily. Caleb parked near the barn and climbed out. He opened Sarathiel's door. She stepped down carefully. The ground felt smaller under her, like she had to measure every movement. She looked around at the ranch, the barn made of metal sheets, the fencing, the solar panels, the water tower, the open sky. For a moment she looked almost peaceful. Then she stiffened and her eyes snapped toward the horizon. Caleb followed her gaze. The sky was still blue, but far away, so high it was barely visible, something shimmered like a faint star in daylight. Sarathiel's voice came out tight, full of old fear. "They found the trail." Caleb's heart beat harder. He forced himself to stay calm because panic never helped anything on a ranch. He glanced at Patch. The drone was already scanning, its body rotating. Caleb took a breath and made a decision, simple and stubborn as the land itself. "All right," he said. "Then we don't stand out in the open." He gestured toward the barn. "Come on, inside." Sarathiel hesitated. Her veil flickered, light rippling like a warning signal. Caleb met her eyes. "You warned me. Now let me help you." She stared at him for a long second, as if trying to understand why a human would do something so risky for a stranger who fell from the sky. Then she nodded once and followed him into the barn, ducking slightly under the doorway. Inside, it smelled of hay, oil, and warm animal breath. Caleb led her past feed bins and tools toward the back, where an old storage room sat behind a sliding metal door. He pulled it open to reveal a space filled with crates, spare parts, and an old tarp-covered object. Caleb pointed. "Sit, rest. Patch will keep watch." Patch hovered near the door, its camera eye sharp and focused. Sarathiel lowered herself onto a crate with care. Her shoulders sagged for the first time since Caleb found her. The glow in her veil dimmed further, like a lantern being turned down. Caleb stood there, hands on his hips, listening to the wind outside. "Sarathiel," he said quietly, "what did you mean by bride?" Her head lifted slowly. Her eyes held something heavy, something older than fear, something like a burden that had been carried too long. She spoke with effort, choosing words she could manage. "They wanted union, peace gift. I was the gift." Caleb's jaw tightened. "You didn't want it." Sarathiel looked away. "Want does not matter." Caleb leaned against a crate, mind racing. He didn't know the wider galaxy well. The colony got news late, and most of it was about trade, prices, and weather. But he knew enough to understand one thing. If someone was hunting her, they weren't sending a small team. Outside, the faint hum in the air grew slightly louder, like a faraway engine waking up. Patch emitted a low warning chirp. Caleb straightened. They're closer. Sarathiel's eyes closed for a brief moment like she was bracing for an ending she had seen before. When she opened them, they were fixed on Caleb. "Human," she said softly, and her voice finally sounded less broken and more real. "You are kind. Kindness will cost." Caleb swallowed, feeling fear rise like cold water in his chest. He pushed it down. "Maybe," he said, "but it's my choice." The wind hit the barn walls and the metal sheets rattled. Somewhere far above the ranch, something moved across the sky without sound, hidden behind light and distance. Caleb looked at the barn door, then back at Sarathiel, and knew his quiet life was over. And for the first time in years, he felt something that wasn't just worry or routine. He felt the sharp beginning of a fight he hadn't asked for, but might not be able to avoid. Patch hovered closer to Caleb, as if choosing a side. Sarathiel's veil flickered once, like a silent signal. Outside, the grazers shifted, restless and sensing danger before any human could. Caleb took one steady breath, then another. "All right," he whispered, more to himself than anyone else. "Let's see what's coming." The barn felt smaller once the hum in the sky grew louder. Caleb stood near the sliding door, listening. The metal walls no longer just held out the wind. They held out something else, something watching. Sarathiel sat on the crate, her long fingers resting on her knees. The glow in her veil pulsed slowly now, like a quiet heartbeat. Every time it brightened, the hum outside seemed to answer, faint but steady. Patch floated in small circles near the door, scanning through the cracks in the metal. Its camera eye shifted colors as it tried to read whatever was in the sky. Caleb finally broke the silence. "How close are they?" Sarathiel did not answer right away. Her eyes were closed, her head tilted slightly, as if she was listening to something far beyond human hearing. "Near enough," she said softly. "Not here yet, they search gently first." Caleb frowned. "Gently, they prefer worlds that do not resist," she said. "Less waste." Caleb didn't like the word waste. He leaned against a shelf filled with spare parts and old tools. "And if a world does resist," Sarathiel opened her eyes. The light in them was dim but steady. "Then they teach others not to." Outside, one of the grazers let out a low call. It wasn't panic yet, just unease. Caleb tapped the side of his leg, thinking. "So what do they want from you, really?" Sarathiel looked down at her hands. Her fingers traced one of the glowing lines on her armor. "My people made agreements long ago. We would send symbols." "Living symbols, brides, to show loyalty." Caleb shook his head. "That's not loyalty, that's trading people." Sarathiel's mouth curved slightly, sad but understanding. "In many places, that is the same." Patch gave a small chirp and projected a simple image in the air. It was a rough scan of the sky above the ranch. A faint shape moved far above the clouds, wide and slow, like a shadow drifting across light. Caleb stared at it. "That's one ship," Sarathiel nodded. "A seeker." Caleb's heart thumped harder. "How many come after that?" Sarathiel hesitated. "Enough." Caleb ran a hand through his hair. The barn creaked as the wind shifted. His ranch, his quiet land, his simple life, suddenly it all felt thin and fragile. He straightened. "All right, we don't wait for them to knock." Sarathiel looked up. "You cannot fight them." Caleb walked toward a control panel on the wall. He pressed a few buttons and old screens flickered to life. "I don't need to win, I just need time." Sarathiel studied him. "Time for what?" Caleb smiled, but it was tight. "For humans to hear there's a problem." He opened the colony broadcast channel. The signal wasn't strong out here, but it worked. He adjusted the mic and took a breath. "This is Caleb Rourke of Kestrel Ridge," he said. "I've got an unidentified alien craft over my land. Not friendly. If anyone's listening, I could use eyes, ships, or anything that makes noise." There was silence, then static. Sarathiel watched him, confusion and something else mixing in her expression. "You call for help from farmers?" Caleb shrugged. "Farmers, miners, traders. Anyone who hates bullies." The screen flickered again. A face appeared. Old Mara from the canyon settlement, her hair gray and tied back, her eyes sharp. "Caleb," she said, "you don't usually cry wolf." "It's not a wolf," Caleb replied. "It's something worse." Behind Mara, other faces appeared, crowding into view. People from small outposts, ship crews, station workers. The quiet network was waking up. Sarathiel stood slowly, moving closer to the screen. She stared at the gathered humans like they were something she had only heard about in stories. Caleb kept talking. "I've got a guest who doesn't want to be collected. I'm not handing her over." Mara leaned closer to her screen. "Collected by who?" Sarathiel spoke before Caleb could answer. Her voice was steady now, clearer than before. "By those who take worlds and call it peace." The room went quiet. A man in a flight jacket stepped into view behind Mara. "That's not a small claim, tall one." Sarathiel met his eyes through the screen. "Neither is your sky." Patch chimed and projected another image. The seeker ship had shifted closer. It was still high, still quiet, but its shape was clearer now, smooth and wide, like a silver blade laid flat against the sky. Murmurs spread across the network. Caleb leaned forward. "I'm not asking for a war, I'm asking for backup, or at least witnesses." Myra nodded slowly. "You'll get both." The screens filled with more signals, small ships lifting off from dusty pads. Old freighters turning in space, people grabbing gear, talking fast, moving with purpose. Sarathiel watched, stunned. "They come for you," Caleb shook his head. "They come because someone needs help." Sarathiel's veil brightened, not in warning, but in something closer to wonder. The hum outside grew louder. Patch gave a sharper chirp. Caleb looked at the barn door. "They're moving." Sarathiel stepped back toward the storage room. "You should hide me," Caleb nodded. He grabbed the tarp from the back and pulled it aside, revealing an old piece of equipment, an abandoned mining rig half taken apart with a hollow space inside its frame. "Get in there," he said. "Stay low." Sarathiel ducked and folded herself into the space, her glowing veil dimming to almost nothing. In the low light, she became a tall shadow instead of a shining symbol. Caleb pulled the tarp back over, leaving just a small gap for air. Patch floated higher, scanning through the barn roof. The hum became a sound, not loud, not sharp, just deep, a tone that made the air feel thick. Dust drifted from the ceiling beams. Caleb stepped outside. The sky above the ranch had changed. The blue was still there, but something cut across it now. A long, smooth shape, wider than the barn, gliding silently. Light bent around it, making it hard to focus on directly, like looking at heat rising off stone. Caleb's chest tightened. A beam of soft, white light reached down from the ship, touching the ground near the grazers. The animals backed away, nervous but not panicking. A voice filled the air. It didn't come from a mouth. It came from everywhere at once. "Sarathiel of the Veil Bound," it said. "Your path ends here." Caleb stepped forward, heart pounding. "This is my land." There was a pause. The voice spoke again. "Human designation detected. This world is not claimed. You are not part of this exchange." Caleb clenched his fists. "She is." Another pause, longer this time. "Sarathiel is property of the Accord," the voice said. "Return her and this world will remain untouched." Caleb laughed, short and sharp. "You don't get to call people property and then talk about peace." The beam of light shifted slightly, scanning him. "Your species is young," the voice said. "You do not understand balance." Caleb looked up at the ship, at the thing hanging in his sky. "I understand one thing. You don't take someone who doesn't want to go." Behind him, the barn door creaked open just a little. Sarathiel watched through the gap, her hands gripping the metal frame. The voice grew colder. "Your resistance will be noted." In the distance, a faint shape appeared in the sky, then another, and another, small ships. "Human ships," old Mara's voice crackled through Caleb's wrist comm. "You've got company, rancher." Caleb smiled despite the fear clawing at his chest. "Told you." The seeker ship shifted, its smooth surface rippling with light. The beam pulled back. Sarathiel stepped out of the barn, her veil glowing brighter now, not as a signal, but as a choice. The voice spoke her name again, sharper. "Return." She lifted her head, tall and steady. "No." The word was simple. It was enough. The human ships drew closer, forming a loose line in the sky. They were small compared to the seeker, patched and mismatched, but they were many. Caleb stood beside Sarathiel, close enough that he could feel the faint warmth of her presence. Patch hovered between them, projecting the image of the growing human fleet. The wind carried dust across the ground. The grazers huddled near the fences, watching. The voice spoke one last time, low and warning. "This path leads to loss." Caleb looked up. "Maybe. But it's our path." The sky filled with movement as more human ships arrived, their engines bright and loud against the quiet glide of the alien craft. Sarathiel's veil shone like a small star beneath the shadow of something much larger. And for the first time since she had fallen from the sky, she did not feel like a gift being traded. She felt like someone standing where she chose to stand. The hum in the air deepened, and the moment stretched tight, like a breath held before a storm. The sky over Kestrel Ridge no longer felt wide and empty. It felt crowded. Human ships hovered in a loose line, their engines glowing in different colors and strengths. Some were sleek and fast, built for trade runs and quick travel. Others were heavy and slow, old mining haulers with extra plates welded onto their sides. A few were nothing more than farming shuttles with tools bolted where weapons should have been. They were not an army. They were a gathering. Caleb stood beside Sarathiel, both of them looking up. The wind pulled at his coat and at her glowing veil. The seeker ship hung above them, silent and smooth, like a piece of the sky that refused to move. Patch floated between them, its camera eye spinning as it tried to track everything at once. The human fleet settled into place, not tight or sharp like a trained force, but wide and stubborn, like people who had decided not to leave. Mara's voice came through Caleb's wrist comm. "We're here, Rancher, you still standing?" Caleb raised his arm and pressed the comm. "Still standing, still not handing her over." A short laugh came through the static. "Good, neither are we." The seeker ship shifted. Its surface rippled again, and thin lines of light traced across it like veins waking up. Sarathiel's shoulders tensed. "They prepare to mark targets," she said softly. Caleb swallowed. "Mark them for what?" "For removal." The word hung in the air. One of the human ships, a small courier with a patched hull, drifted forward a little. Its pilot's voice came over the open channel, nervous but clear. "Big shiny thing in the sky, this is free space. You don't get to push people around here." There was no reply at first. Then the seeker spoke, not with sound, but through every comm at once. "Human vessels withdraw. This matter does not concern you." Mara cut in fast. "It concerns us when you start calling people property." Other voices joined in, different accents, different tones. All saying the same thing in their own way. Sarathiel looked up at the human ships, her eyes wide. "You should leave," she said quietly. "They will not stop at warning." Caleb shook his head. "Neither do we." Patch chirped sharply and projected a new image. Around the seeker ship, small points of light were appearing. Drones, dozens of them like glowing insects spreading out in a wide circle. The human ships shifted, engines flaring brighter. Caleb felt his heart hammer in his chest. He didn't have a weapon, he didn't have a plan. All he had was a choice he had already made. The seeker's drones moved closer. A human voice came over the channel, young and shaking. "They're coming in." Mara's voice followed, steady and strong. "Hold, don't fire unless they do." Sarathiel stepped forward, raising one hand. Her veil brightened, sending soft waves of light across the ground. "Stop," she said, her voice carrying farther than it should have. "By the old laws, you must hear me." The drone slowed, the seeker ship paused, the voice spoke again. "The veil-bound may speak." Sarathiel took a breath. Her words came slower now, but stronger. "I was sent as a symbol, a bridge, not a chain. You broke the meaning of the accord when you made me a thing to be owned." There was a long silence. Caleb glanced at the human ships. Some of them drifted closer, as if leaning in to listen. The voice replied, colder. "Symbols do not choose." Sarathiel lowered her hand. "Then your peace is built on lies." The drones moved again. Mara's voice cut in. "That's close enough." One of the mining haulers powered up a cutting beam, not aiming at the seeker, but firing it across open space as a warning line of light. The drones stopped. For a moment, everything froze. Wind, light, engines, breath. Then the seeker ship released a pulse. It wasn't an explosion. It was a wave. The air shimmered and the human ships rocked as if hit by a strong wind in space. Systems flickered. Comms crackled. Caleb dropped to one knee, hands on the ground, head spinning. Sarathiel staggered but stayed on her feet. Her veil flared bright like it was pushing back against the invisible force. Patch spun wildly, then steadied itself, emitting a strained chirp. The human ships wobbled, some drifting out of line. A few pulled back, engines flaring in panic. Mara's voice came through, rough. "Everyone check in, stay together." Caleb forced himself up. He looked at Sarathiel. "You okay?" She nodded, but her face was pale. "That was a warning." Caleb stared up at the seeker ship. "We're still here." Sarathiel looked at him, and for a moment something like respect crossed her face. The human fleet regrouped. Ships moved back into place, closer together, now tighter than before. A trader's voice came through. "We don't have their tech, we don't have their shields. But we've got mass." Another voice added, "And we've got time." Sarathiel's head turned sharply. "Time?" Caleb smiled grimly. "Humans are very good at making things take longer than anyone wants." Patch projected a rough map of the area around the seeker ship. The drones were spread wide now, forming a loose net. Caleb tapped the image. "They're trying to box us in," Mara's voice answered. "Then we don't sit still." One by one, the human ships began to move, not forward, not back, sideways, up, down. Slow, steady shifts, breaking the neat pattern the drones were trying to form. The Seeker's drones adjusted, trying to keep up. Sarathiel watched, confused. "What are they doing?" Caleb shrugged. "Being annoying." A small, fast ship darted forward, then back, drawing a few drones with it. Another ship moved wide, pulling part of the net out of shape. The human fleet didn't attack. They didn't charge. They drifted and danced and pulled the drones out of position, making the Seeker ship constantly adjust. The voice spoke again, sharper now. "Cease this movement." Mara laughed over the channel. "Make us." The Seeker ship pulsed again, stronger this time. The wave hit harder. Two human ships lost control and spun, engines flaring as their pilots fought to steady them. Caleb's vision blurred. He grabbed the fence post beside him to stay upright. Sarathiel dropped to one knee, her veil dimmed, flickering like a weak light. Caleb rushed to her side. "Hey, stay with me." She looked up, breathing hard. "They are pressing my link, they can feel me." Caleb clenched his jaw. "Then we keep them busy." Patch suddenly projected a new signal. More human ships were coming, not dozens, hundreds. Tiny dots on the edge of the scan, growing larger. Mara's voice carried a note of surprise. "We sent the call farther than I thought." A young pilot's voice cut in, excited and scared. "Stations are launching. Even the old orbital platforms are moving." The Seeker ship shifted for the first time, not just adjusting, but pulling back slightly. Sarathiel noticed. "They did not expect this." Caleb grinned. "Nobody ever does." The drones tightened their formation, moving closer to the Seeker ship as if retreating to protect it. The human fleet kept moving, slow and steady like a tide. The sky grew brighter with engine light and reflected glow. Sarathiel stood again, using Caleb's shoulder for balance. "They will change tactics." Caleb looked at her. "How?" Her eyes darkened. "They will stop trying to take me. They will try to make you give me." As if on cue, a beam of light reached down from the Seeker ship, not at Sarathiel, but at the barn. The metal walls glowed, heating fast. Caleb shouted, "Hey!" The beam moved, sweeping across the ranch. The water tower hissed as steam rose from its side. The fence posts smoldered. Sarathiel cried out, "They threaten what you love." Caleb felt something snap inside his chest. "That's not a threat, that's a mistake." Mara's voice roared over the channel. "All ships focus on the beam source. Don't hit the hull, break their line of sight." The human ship surged forward, not in a charge, but in a wall. Mining haulers, freighters, shuttles, all drifting into the path of the beam. The light struck the first ship and split around it, bending and scattering. More ships moved in, stacking themselves between the Seeker and the ground. Caleb watched, stunned, as people put their own ships in harm's way to shield a dusty ranch and a stranger from the sky. Sarathiel's veil flared bright like a star being born. "Why do they do this?" Caleb's voice was rough. "Because now it's their problem too." The Seeker ship's voice came again, no longer calm. "Withdraw your vessels," Mara answered. "Not today." The drones surged forward, moving to push the human ships aside. Patch chirped wildly, projecting warnings and movement patterns. Caleb looked at Sarathiel. "You said they take worlds. How do they win?" Sarathiel swallowed. "They wait, they outlast, they make others tired." Caleb nodded slowly. "Yeah, we know that trick." The human ships didn't retreat, they held. Engines flared, hulls rattled, people shouted and laughed and cursed over open channels. Time stretched. The Seeker ship pulled back a little more, rising higher. Sarathiel noticed. "They are reconsidering." Caleb looked up. "Good." But the sky was not empty anymore. More Seeker ships appeared on the horizon, not close, not yet, but there. Sarathiel's face fell. "This is only the first." Caleb's smile faded, but his eyes stayed hard. "Then this is only the first time they learn something about us." Patch projected the growing shapes in the distance. Mara's voice came through, quieter now. "We can't hold forever." Caleb pressed his calm. "We don't have to, we just have to make them remember this place." Sarathiel turned to him. "Remember how?" Caleb looked at the human fleet, at the patched ships and stubborn people hanging in the sky. "As the place where they were told no." The Seeker ship rose higher, its drones pulling back, regrouping. The beam of light vanished. For a moment, the sky was just sky again, filled with human ships and dust and wind. Sarathiel let out a breath she had been holding for a very long time. Caleb rested his hands on his knees, exhausted but standing. Patch hovered close, steady now. The first Seeker ship drifted back, joining the distant shapes. They did not leave, but they did not advance, not yet. Sarathiel looked at Caleb, her eyes shining with something new. "They fear this." Caleb nodded. "Good, let them." Above them, humans and aliens stared at each other across open space, neither willing to move first. And in that quiet standoff, something changed, not just for Sarathiel, but for every world that would hear the story of a small ranch on a dusty planet where a species decided together that some things were worth standing in the way of the sky for. The dawn on Kestrel Ridge came not with warmth, but with quiet tension. The horizon glowed pale red as the sun fought to rise over the jagged rocks and long stretches of grass. Caleb stood on the ridge outside his barn, watching the sky. It was crowded with human ships now, moving in loose formations, their engines humming low like a heartbeat. Beyond them, faint silver shapes shimmered against the sunlight, the distant seekers, still hovering, still watching. Sarathiel emerged from the barn, her tall frame silhouetted against the rising sun. Her veil shimmered softly, pale blue threads glowing with the light of the morning. She had spent the night resting, but even in sleep, she had kept one hand hovering near her chest plate, as if anticipating danger. Caleb noted the way she moved, careful but deliberate, the muscles in her legs taut and ready. "Did you sleep?" he asked. Her eyes lifted to his, and she shook her head faintly. "Sleep is not safe while they watch," Caleb nodded. "I get that." He glanced at the human fleet spread across the horizon. "They're not gone yet, but they're not close either." Sarathiel studied the ships. "Your people, they are clever. They do not fight as you warned. They confuse and frustrate." Caleb gave a half-smile. "Humans aren't the fastest or strongest, but we don't quit easily." Patch floated between them, its camera eye spinning in a slow circle. The drone projected a faint holographic map of the valley below and the movements of the ships in the sky. "Scans indicate that the drones are forming wider perimeters," Caleb said, reading the projections. "They're trying to block us, force us into open space where they can control the fight." Sarathiel's hand brushed the veil from her face as she leaned closer to study the map. "They will adapt, they will pressure. They do not understand humans yet, but they will try." Caleb rubbed his jaw. "Then we show them, we'll make them understand anyway." For hours, the human ships moved with quiet purpose. Mining haulers, shuttles, old freighters, even small scout vessels. They had no weapons strong enough to match the Seekers, but they had numbers, improvisation, and sheer determination. Small beams of light, nets of magnetic fields, even improvised EMP pulses flickered across the sky, testing the alien drones' formations. The Seekers reacted every time, their silver bodies rippling, their drones adjusting. But every adjustment the Seekers made, the human ships countered, slow and stubborn, like a tide reshaping the sand under the rocks. Sarathiel watched, her expression a mixture of awe and disbelief. "They do not yield ever. They fight without fighting." Caleb leaned on the side of the barn. "They fight because they care, not for glory or conquest, but because it matters to them. That's why they're dangerous." A sudden pulse of light swept across the sky, forcing Caleb and Sarathiel to duck instinctively. The Seeker ship's drones surged forward, forming a dense, glowing wall that blocked part of the valley. Caleb felt the ground vibrate under his boots. The humans' makeshift shields, their ships, tethered platforms, and even dust-filled tractor units rocked against the invisible pressure. Sarathiel's voice was urgent. "They test you. They measure your resolve." Caleb spat into the dust. "Let them measure all they want. They'll find out humans don't break easily." Hours passed, and the tension grew heavier. The sun climbed, casting long shadows across the dusty ground. Caleb's muscles ached from standing so long, from gripping his calm and staring at the horizon. The grazers, sensing the change, huddled closer to the fences, eyes wide, tails flicking nervously. Sarathiel stepped beside him, her tall form imposing yet calm. She had begun to understand the humans around her in ways she had never expected. "They do not need orders," she said. "They act without permission and yet in harmony." Caleb looked at her. "That's what makes us hard to predict. We don't always fight the way others expect." Patch projected a new image, showing the drones' movements as more humans arrived from the distant outposts and stations. The numbers were growing, not in an organized formation, not in a military line, but in a persistent, spreading network. Each ship's movement was unpredictable, yet together they formed a barrier against the Seekers. Sarathiel's eyes widened. "More of them arrive, they will overwhelm with persistence, not power." Caleb nodded. "Exactly, that's how we win, not by strength, but by refusing to stop." Suddenly a pulse hit the valley, stronger than before. The ground beneath the barn vibrated, sending a few loose tools rattling across the floor. Caleb gritted his teeth and steadied himself. The human ships were hit too, some rocked violently, systems flickering as the energy wave passed through. Sarathiel stumbled, her glowing veil pulsing wildly. "This is not their main power," she said, voice tense. "They test first. They see if you yield." Caleb's hands tightened into fists. "We don't yield, and we won't." The Seeker ship's voice echoed through the valley, cold and metallic. "Humans, step aside. The matter does not concern you." Caleb barked back into his calm. "It concerns us when you treat living beings as property." The human fleet moved as one, creating a wall of ships that cut off the drones' forward movement. Each vessel was different, patched, old, and sometimes barely functional, but together they formed an unbroken line. The drones collided with it, scanning and testing, only to be pushed back again. Sarathiel's veil flared brightly. "Your people, they coordinate without command, they act as one." Caleb shrugged, exhausted but steady. "We call it stubbornness, works better than you'd think." For a long time, the drones and humans remained locked in this strange standoff. Neither side advanced aggressively, but neither would retreat. Caleb could see the strain in the drones' movements, their attempts to push through foiled by the unexpected ingenuity of humans. Then Sarathiel did something Caleb had not expected. She raised her hand, and her veil expanded, glowing brightly. Light pulsed from her armor and spread across the barn and the ridge. The effect was subtle but unmistakable. She amplified the human ship's sensors, guiding them, giving them insight into the drone's movement patterns. The Seeker ship paused, recalculating, as the humans adapted faster than it could predict. Caleb realized that Sarathiel was not just a passenger. She was an ally, a bridge, and now an active participant in the resistance. The drones surged again, but the human fleet responded with coordinated sweeps and barriers, forcing them to retreat. The valley echoed with the hum of engines, the whirring of drones, and the faint hiss of Sarathiel's armor interacting with the environment. Caleb wiped sweat from his brow. "You see that? We're pushing them back." Sarathiel nodded, her eyes sharp. "Not just pushing. You teach them to hesitate." Caleb allowed himself a short smile. "Humans are good at teaching lessons, especially when it matters." Hours passed in this delicate balance. The sun rose higher, casting harsh light over the valley. Caleb realized that neither side intended to end the fight quickly. The Seekers tested, the humans adapted. Every move and countermove stretched the limits of patience and endurance. Sarathiel stood beside Caleb, scanning the horizon with him. "They do not understand yet." "But they will," she said softly. "They will learn that humans are not simple, they do not break." Caleb nodded. "They're learning fast enough." Patch floated nearby, projecting another map of the sky. More human ships were arriving, joining the slow, steady wall. It was a makeshift fleet, but it was becoming something more than the sum of its parts. The Seekers adjusted, their movements less confident now, their tests more cautious. Sarathiel's eyes glimmered. "Your species is dangerous in ways they cannot calculate. Not because of power, but because of persistence. Because of loyalty." Caleb glanced at her. "That's exactly why we stand together. It's not strength that counts. It's what we protect and how far we go to protect it." A beam of energy shot from the Seeker ship, but the human wall absorbed and deflected it, the small fleet moving as a living shield. Caleb felt the vibration through the ground. Dust and pebbles rattled against the barn walls. Sarathiel's veil flared in response, a wave of light pulsing outward. The human fleet adjusted instantly, moving in harmony with her signal. The drones hesitated, unsure how to respond. Caleb realized what she was doing. "You're helping us coordinate," she nodded faintly. "I guide, you act together." The effect was immediate. The drones' pressure weakened. The Seekers pulled back slightly, recalculating. Caleb's jaw tightened. They were not going to win by sheer force. They would have to adapt to the humans' persistence and ingenuity. Hours passed. The valley grew quiet except for the hum of engines and the faint buzz of Sarathiel's veil. The human ships remained in place, tireless, adapting, blocking, confusing the drones. Caleb looked at Sarathiel. "They will learn something here." Something they did not expect. Sarathiel's eyes reflected the rising sun. "They will remember, not just you but all of your species. They will see humans are not to be underestimated." Caleb nodded slowly. He felt the weight of what they had done. Not through weapons, not through sheer power, but through patience, coordination, and determination. Humans had held their ground against a force far beyond their understanding. The Seekers retreated slowly, their drones pulling back, the sky clearing just enough to see the blue above. The human ships adjusted, holding their positions but no longer an immediate threat. Sarathiel lowered her hand. The veil dimmed, returning to its normal, quiet glow. She looked at Caleb. "This is only the first lesson. They will come again." Caleb gave a firm nod. "Then we'll be ready. They'll learn that Kestrel Ridge is not just land, it's human land, and humans do not give up." Patch hovered between them, silent now, scanning the remaining drones at a distance. Caleb felt a deep sense of resolve. They had survived the first wave, but he knew the fight was far from over. Yet in the quiet aftermath, something had changed. The humans, the alien, and even the drones had seen a truth they could not ignore. Persistence, loyalty, and the courage to stand together could make even the strongest enemies hesitate. Sarathiel watched the human fleet, and for the first time she felt not fear but something else, hope. Caleb looked over the valley, the barn, the grazers, and the rising human ships. He clenched his fists, feeling the wind push against him. "We'll show them, every time. No matter what." And for the first time in a long time, the quiet ranch on the dusty world felt like the center of something bigger. A spark that would ignite far beyond the ridge, a lesson the galaxy would not forget. The sky held its breath, and Caleb, Sarathiel, and Patch were ready to meet whatever came next together. The morning air on Kestrel Ridge carried a tense calm, but Caleb could feel it in his bones. The quiet before a storm far larger than any the ridge had ever seen. The human fleet hung in the sky, patched and worn, yet unyielding, a living shield that glinted in the rising sun. Even the grazers felt it, their eyes fixed upward, ears twitching. Caleb's hand rested on the fence post, feeling the vibrations from the engines above. Sarathiel stood beside him, her height imposing, her veil glowing faintly. She had been through the night without rest, but now her posture was straight, resolute. Her presence was calm yet powerful, a reminder that her species had survived for reasons Caleb could barely understand, yet he trusted her instinctively. "They come," she said quietly, her voice firm but low. "They do not retreat, they calculate, they are persistent." Caleb nodded. "We don't have to retreat either. We're not the ones who have to calculate their moves, we just have to hold." Patch hovered nearby, its camera eye spinning as it scanned the horizon. A new wave of shapes shimmered at the edge of the sky, more seeker ships, larger and faster than the one they had already faced. Caleb could see the faint glow of their drones spreading, creating patterns that seemed to anticipate the human ships' every move. Mara's voice crackled through the calm. "All ships prepare for engagement. This is not a drill. Keep the line steady and protect the surface." Caleb felt his chest tighten. The barn, the ridge, the herd, it was all small compared to the vast sky filled with alien machines. Yet he was not afraid, not fully. "Caleb," Sarathiel said, her eyes scanning the approaching fleet. "They underestimate what humans can do. They assume fear will control you. It does not." He gave a small, tired smile. "Never has." The first drones moved forward, forming a grid that stretched from the lead seeker ship to the outer edges of the atmosphere. Their light shimmered and reflected off the human ships, attempting to confuse sensors, obscure positions, and create openings. But humans were stubborn. They adapted. Ships changed positions constantly, creating shifting patterns that kept the drones guessing. Sarathiel stepped forward, raising one hand. Her veil pulsed brightly, casting a soft light across the valley. "Let me guide them," she said. "Together we can show them the strength of persistence." Caleb nodded. "Do what you can." He turned to Patch. "Project their positions, help her." Patch's camera eye spun faster, projecting a web of data across the valley, showing movement patterns of both the drones and the human ships. Sarathiel extended her hands over the projections, guiding the humans indirectly, her own abilities interfacing with the fleet. Light from her veil pulsed with each adjustment, creating a subtle rhythm that the human pilots instinctively followed. The drones surged forward, attempting to isolate Caleb's position, to force the humans to make mistakes. But the humans responded, moving as one organism, shifting positions in unison, improvising barriers and countermeasures that confused the drones. Sarathiel's eyes glimmered. "They do not follow orders. They act in coordination without command. This is remarkable." Caleb glanced at her. "They act because they care about each other, about us, about what's right." The seeker ship above pulsed again, a wave of energy that rippled through the valley. Caleb felt the ground shake beneath his boots. Several of the smaller human ships rocked violently, their engines struggling against the invisible force. Sarathiel stumbled slightly but steadied herself. "They are testing limits," she said. "They want to see if humans yield if you break." Caleb tightened his fists. "We don't yield, and we won't." The human fleet adjusted instantly, using makeshift shields, shifting positions, and timing their movements to absorb the energy pulse. One by one, the ships righted themselves, undeterred. The Seekers pulsed again, stronger, but each time the humans adapted. Sarathiel's veil glowed brighter, the lines of light forming patterns that guided human movements like an unseen conductor. The drones faltered, their grid of control breaking under the humans' persistence and Sarathiel's coordination. Caleb's heart pounded in his chest. "Look at them, they're learning. We're teaching them something they didn't expect." She nodded slowly. "They are learning that power is not only force, it is will, it is persistence, it is loyalty." Caleb glanced at Patch. "Keep tracking the drones, relay everything to the fleet, every movement counts." The Seeker ship's voice resonated through every channel simultaneously, cold and commanding. "Human vessels, withdraw immediately. This matter does not concern you. Stand aside or be destroyed." Mara's voice cut in. "We don't stand aside, not here, not now." The drones surged again, attempting to break the human line. Caleb's stomach clenched, but he stood firm, watching the valley. The beam of light from the Seeker struck near the grazer's pens, sending up a plume of dust. Caleb shouted and ran forward, waving his arms to signal the human ships. "Keep them off! Protect the ground!" The human fleet adjusted instantly, moving as a wall to shield the land. Mining haulers, freighters, and small scouts drifted into the beam's path, absorbing energy pulses that would have destroyed anything smaller. Caleb felt the vibration under his feet, the hum of engines mixing with the air's tension. Sarathiel's veil flared brightly. She moved among the projections Patch displayed, directing the human ships with subtle pulses of light. Each movement was precise, instinctive, and effective. The drones faltered, uncertain how to respond to the combination of human ingenuity and Sarathiel's guidance. Caleb glanced at her. "You're saving us." She shook her head slightly. "No, we are working together. You guide with determination. I amplify. This is the strength of humans." Hours passed in a tense, silent struggle. The drones surged and retreated, testing the human fleet again and again. Each time, the humans adapted, shifting positions, forming new patterns, and holding the line. The sun climbed higher, casting harsh light over the valley, revealing every movement, every glint of metal, every pulse of energy. Sarathiel's voice was quiet but firm. "They do not understand yet. They see only machines and ships. They do not see the people inside, the will inside. That is their mistake." Caleb nodded. "We'll make them see." Another pulse of energy shot from the Seeker ship, stronger than before. The barn shook, dust falling from the beams. Caleb pressed himself against the wood, keeping his balance. Sarathiel's veil flared with a pulse of light that seemed to push back against the wave. The human fleet responded instantly, adjusting shields and positions in perfect rhythm. Caleb looked around. Every ship, every pilot, every person acting without central command. Together, they formed an unbreakable pattern. The drones hesitated, unsure how to advance against this living wall of persistence. Sarathiel stepped closer to Caleb. "They are learning now that humans are dangerous not because of their weapons, but because of their will." Caleb swallowed hard. "Exactly. That's why we stand. That's why we don't move." Patch chirped, projecting a new map of the sky. The distant Seekers were beginning to pull back, their formations looser, their drones hesitant. The human fleet held strong, relentless, coordinated. The Seeker ship's voice came again, urgent and colder than before. "Cease this resistance. It is futile." Mara's voice answered firmly. "Not futile, not while we breathe." Sarathiel's veil flared one final time, bright and unbroken. The drones shifted, faltered, and then retreated behind the lead Seeker ship. The alien vessel rose higher, joining the distant shapes on the horizon. The sky above the ridge was still crowded, but the immediate threat had receded. Caleb exhaled, his body trembling with relief and exhaustion. He looked at Sarathiel. "We did it, for now." She nodded slowly, her eyes reflecting the rising sun. "You do not win by force alone. You win by standing, by refusing to break. Your species has a power they cannot calculate." Caleb smiled faintly, tired but resolute. "That's humans for you." The grazers, sensing the calm, lowered their heads to graze again. The wind carried the scent of dust and metal, mixing with the quiet hum of engines and the faint glow of Sarathiel's veil. Mara's voice came softly through the calm. "You did well, rancher. Your little world, it made them hesitate. It made them respect humans." Caleb chuckled tiredly. "Thanks, Mara, but it wasn't just me. It was all of us. Humans, alien, drone, everyone who stood together." Sarathiel looked out over the ridge, her veil dimming to its natural glow. "I have seen many worlds taken without struggle. I have seen civilizations bend without resistance. But here, you fight differently. You do not fight to conquer, you fight to protect. That is dangerous and admirable." Caleb placed a hand on the fence post, feeling the vibrations of the land and the fleet above. "That's why we survived, not because we are strong, but because we care, and we won't quit." Patch hovered near them, silent now, monitoring but calm. The horizon was clear for now. The distant seekers remained, but they had retreated, their lines broken, their tactics challenged. Sarathiel finally turned to Caleb fully, her glowing veil catching the sunlight. "Then I will stay, for now, not as a gift, not as a symbol, but as one who chooses to stand with you." Caleb's chest tightened, pride and exhaustion mingling. "Then you're welcome here. Kestrel Ridge is your home if you want it." The sun climbed higher, casting the ridge in warm light. The air was still tense but calm. The valley, the barn, the human fleet, it all felt alive with possibility. Caleb looked out at the horizon and thought about the galaxy beyond the ridge. He knew this battle was just the beginning. More seekers, more challenges, more tests of will would come. But he also knew something else, something that gave him strength. Humans would face it together, and with allies like Sarathiel, they would endure. Sarathiel's veil glimmered softly in the sunlight, no longer a warning but a promise. Caleb, the ranchers, the human fleet, and even the strange alien woman standing beside him. They had shown that persistence, loyalty, and courage could stand against any force, no matter how overwhelming. And on Kestrel Ridge, for the first time in years, the wind carried a new message. Humanity had made its mark, and the galaxy would remember. Caleb looked at Sarathiel and smiled. "Ready for the next lesson?" She returned the smile, a real one this time. "Always." The sky above remained vast and waiting. But now Caleb knew humans had taught the stars to hesitate, and that hesitation was everything. The wind swept across Kestrel Ridge, carrying dust and hope together, and the ridge was no longer just a quiet farm. It was a place where the galaxy had learned the price of underestimating humanity. Patch chirped once, soft and steady, as if in agreement. Caleb tightened his coat and looked at the distant horizon. The fight was far from over, but the lesson had begun.